And so from June 1st, he didn't get any on the 2nd, and then on the 3rd, he received 200 milligrams, correct?
According to only the records of Dr. Klein's chart.
Is that correct?
Yes, sir.
Well, you know, repeatedly you've indicated that Dr. Klein gave too much Demerol when there were sequential days of 3, and you trust the records then, right?
Sir, I've never said I trust the records.
Okay.
The records are inadequate, but I can look at the records and interpret them.
Did you look at the records that Dr. Murray provided for his treatment of Michael Jackson?
Objection to relevance, and asked and answered. He was.
The objection is sustained. It assumes facts not in evidence. You may re-ask the question.
So then from June 3rd to June 10th, how many days elapsed before the next injection?
Sir, let me redirect you a tad. It's June 3rd to June 9th, so that was 6 days.
6 days, okay.
Yes.
And then from June 9th to June 16th, how many days elapsed?
1 week.
And then from June 16th to June 22nd, how many days elapsed?
6.
And as an addiction specialist, then, would you characterize, is this unusual that if Michael Jackson would be experiencing withdrawals within 8 to 10 hours, that there would be this much period of time between injections? Is that unusual?
Sir, persons with opioid dependence and addiction, as we discussed, often have multiple sources. If they can't get their main med, they will look elsewhere to get it, and I have no data. So the answer is I really don't know what was happening in those days.
Let's talk about other sources. What would you say would be the most common withdrawal symptoms for a benzodiazepine or lorazepam addiction? What would be the 4 or 5 most common symptoms you'd expect to see?
The most common and the most prominent is absolutely anxiety.
And one of them also is insomnia, correct?
Correct.
What else, as far as the most common?
Restlessness. For benzodiazepine?
Yes.
Okay. Restlessness, agitation, inability to sleep, crawly skin, just inability to really get any form of comfort. Overwhelming anxiety.
Fear? Is that kind of included in anxiety?
Fear even comes before that because they're fearful they're not going to get medicated.
Now, as a controlled substance and regulated by the Drug Enforcement Agency, there are specific state and federal rules that apply to lorazepam, correct?
Yes, sir.
Okay. One of those rules involves the proper storage of lorazepam to keep it out of hands of individuals that shouldn't have it or are not being monitored, correct?
I have no experience and no expertise whatsoever with storing any form of lorazepam, sir.
Well, I have an exhibit here. It's from the Laws Governing the Practice of Medicine, published by the Medical Board of California, including a section on 5.7 on medical records and 5...
Just a moment. You can just identify this, how many page document?
3-page document, Your Honor.
3-page document, 227?
Please, Your Honor.
227. Mr. Chernoff, have you seen it?
Nope.
You may. It's being shown to Mr. Chernoff. Thank you, Mr. Chernoff.
Dr. Waldman, would you agree with the statement as it relates to controlled substances, that state and federal laws require physicians to maintain adequate and accurate medical records? Would you agree with that?
Yes, sir.
And would you agree with the statement that pursuant to state and federal laws, these records must be kept for a minimum of 3 years.
Yes, sir. I actually thought it was 7, but I accept 3 if that's what you're reading.
And also, as put out by the Medical Board of California, would you agree with this statement as it relates to controlled substances, that a physician is required to keep drugs in a securely locked and substantially constructed cabinet or safe?
Yes, sir.
And why is that requirement in place?
To prevent theft and diversion.
That's it?
I believe so.
You don't think it relates to preventing unsafe use of the drugs?
That would require theft and diversion.
Okay. So it's theft, meaning someone getting access to the drugs.
Even an employee, of course.
Anybody.
Anybody.
And that's why it should be in a locked, secured cabinet.
If
Correct?
I agree with all the aspects of the law, sir.
So keeping the records, for example, that we just referenced for, I said 3 years, you thought it was 7, that would be the acceptable standard of care as to medical records, right? Pursuant to state and federal law.
Yes, keeping records, accurate records, that would be the accepted standard.
And as it relates to securing controlled substances, the acceptable standard of care would be, as I indicated, to have it in a locked, secured cabinet or safe, correct?
I have to back up one
Well,
second.
we can clarify. I'm asking a question about the storage of controlled substances. The acceptable standard of care would involve keeping them secured in a locked cabinet or safe or equivalent structure, correct?
And you document what's there and when it leaves, and there's signatures going in, going out, etc.
So
that would be the standard of care.
So that it be
In fact, that's the law.
that it be in a locked, secured cabinet or safe,
Yes, sir.
that it be an inventory be maintained,
Yes, sir.
Can you describe to me, as an addiction medicine specialist, characterize for us the doctor-patient relationship?
Just in general?
Who makes the decisions as to proper medical care in the doctor-patient relationship as it relates to addiction medicine?
Okay. Well, let me give my overview of that. I think
No, I asked you a question.
it's not a yes/no question.
If you can't answer this, then you can answer. You can answer. I'm going to be very
Okay.
specific. Who makes the decision as to the proper medical care to be given as it relates to addiction medicine? The patient or the doctor?
Both.
So the patient decides what type of medical care is appropriate.
Again, what's involved is the development of a good therapeutic relationship, a therapeutic bond, and then the doctor and patient move forward as part of the team. So very often there are more than one way to treat a problem. So yes, you have to present your patient all of the available treatment options, and then you recommend, or in the appropriate circumstance, strongly recommend what you would like them to do. If they choose not to follow your recommendation, you move forward from there and work that out.
You said you explained to them all the available treatment options. That's called informed consent, correct?
I don't know if that's exactly informed consent, but again, I think education is part of our job as physicians, so I do my best to educate my patients as to what the possibilities are, and then I make my strong recommendation about what I'd like them to pursue with respect to course of treatment. Yes.
And you said if you make a strong recommendation and they refuse, you said you move forward. What does that mean?
Well, I've had patients tell me that they would like to detox from opiates with other opiates, and I tell them that's a non-starter. That's not going to happen. In my experience, if you're persuasive and sincere and you strongly believe in what you're presenting to your patient in any aspect of medical care, the patient generally will do what you suggest, but you have to present them the options.
An example you gave is if a patient wanted to go through detox with the very drug they were dependent on, you would not do that.
For opiates.
What about other drugs?
Well, for instance, you've asked a number of questions about benzodiazepines. I often offer people the opportunity to taper their benzodiazepine, which is quite safe, or do another form of medication substitution therapy. In my practice, I prefer to substitute phenobarb for benzodiazepine and then taper that. That's safe.
Why do you prefer, and you gave the example Lorazepam, you said you prefer to use another drug. Why do you prefer doing that rather than tapering off the use of Lorazepam?
I like to stop the drug of addiction immediately.
Because that's the goal.
Because that's the goal. But some people would prefer not to do it that way. So again, you have to, as in many other aspects of medicine, you really have to individualize treatment.
So again, going back to you strongly recommend a course of treatment based on your medical judgment, and the patient refuses, and there's no other alternative. What do you do?
I don't treat them.
And if a patient asked you for you to administer a dangerous drug, a drug you thought could be harmful, and it was not medically indicated, would you refuse to give that drug to the patient?
Absolutely.
Thank you, doctor.
Waldman, thank you. Mr. Chernoff, this will be redirect examination.
Doctor, let me see People's exhibit. They're demonstrative aid. People's number, is it number 226?
227, I believe.
Okay, is it 227? Because it says 226 on here.
I may be wrong.
I believe it's 226 on the chart.
Oh, the chart, yes, 226. Thank you. I'm sorry.
You did not make this, right? Like they said, right?
I did not make that chart.
You actually did put together some charts. We were trying to determine the cycle of use. Is that right?
Yes.
And let me show you an example of that. This is VVV, Defense VVV, Judge.
It's triple Victor.
Okay. And we, in our discussions, we were looking at the medical records, and we were trying to determine this cycle. Do you recall our discussions on that?
I do.
And you put this together with, was it Excel? Was it an Excel? Oh, your secretary did.
You know, I have a wonderful secretary in my office, and she's much more chart literate than I, so she created that.
And then you did it for May as well, and I'm going to mark this as WWW?
Triple whiskey.
Okay. And we were somewhat confused by the change in the process, in the amount, in the drugs and the amounts and everything else. Do you recall the conversation we had?
Yes.
And then, and this was all based only on Arnold Klein's medical records, right?
Correct.
Now, during our conversation, during your review of this analysis, I also provided you the testimony of various individuals that testified in this case. Is that right?
Yes.
Now, prior to providing you that testimony, hearing that testimony in the trial, we had conversations about whether or not these records were complete. Remember those conversations?
I do.
Were you concerned?
All right. At this point in time, the objection's over. The answer will remain.
Were you concerned about whether these records were complete at that time?
No. When I first looked at the records, I had no reason to be concerned that they were incomplete.
You just made the assumption that they were right.
I just assumed that the records were the records. They had been submitted, and I accepted them as submitted.
Because we received them through subpoena, right? By court
Yes.
order. All right.
The court received them
The
through
objection
subpoena.
is sustained. The answer will be stricken. Disregard the last answer. You can re-ask it, please.
Thanks. And subsequent to that time, then we had the ability to obtain the testimony of of Fahim Muhammad, right?
Yes.
And Michael Amir Williams.
Yes.
And you reviewed the testimony of those individuals.
Very briefly.
And you know what they had to say, or you learned what they had to say about the frequency of Michael Jackson's visits to Arnold Klein's office.
Yes.
And Fahim Muhammad said essentially every day.